Thank you, everyone, and welcome to today's class. We are going to be doing Shibori shirts and bags. So Shibori might look similar to tie-dye, but Shibori is a Japanese tradition, ancient way of dyeing. It's a dyeing technique that's using binding and using twine and using twisting and different techniques in order to create some really beautiful designs. So we're going to go through 3 different Shibori techniques today. The one that you saw first is kind of like a spiral technique. And then I'm also going to show you one that involves some wood blocks to get some like rectangles and some geometric shapes. And I'm going to show you another technique that we're going to use that uses binder clips. And the binder clips obviously give it this cool look and feel as well. So we're going to go through 3 different dyeing techniques. I'm here in my kitchen, so you know I mean business. I do not cook in this kitchen, I craft in this kitchen. I can make a lot of things, but dinner, no. So welcome, thank you for coming today. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer all your questions. Rich is going to give me a heads up if I get too far away from my screen and can't see everything. So I have in my kitchen right now, over here, a pot of hot water that has been boiling. So I boiled a pot of hot water and I add salt to my water in order to get it to boil faster. And so this again is a pot that I'm dyeing in. This is not a pot that I'm cooking in because I will be ordering in. And it has salt in it in order to help the boiling point get there faster. So it has already come to a boil and it has already started the cooling process down. So while we're kind of working together to set up all of the Shibori techniques, this water is going from boiling and it's slowly going back down. But if your water is about at 170 degrees, that should be perfect for the dyeing techniques. If you might be able to get your tap water to get that hot, but if you can't, then you might want to do what I'm doing, which is boil some water, heat it up, and then use it. So I'm going to go from there. Let's think, what else do we need? So for today's class, I am going to be using cotton, and cotton's going to work best for the type of dye I suggested. So the Rit dye is going to be indigo, but typically or traditionally, all the Shibori techniques are done using the color indigo and using very natural indigo dyes. But if you want to go rogue and do a different color like red, this is a scarlet Rit dye that you can use in order to create a different color. Feel free to use the color that you so choose, but traditionally, Shibori is done using indigo. So we're going to be wrapping up and binding because that's kind of what this whole thing is all about. And then I'm going to show you the process of putting it into the dye bath. And then the best part is the reveal, very dramatic reveal. Remember that this is a live class, so I don't know what it's going to look like yet either. So if one messes up, we'll be like, oh, that's great, Megan. Good job, right, guys? Right? So that's the plan. Let's go ahead and switch over to my overhead camera. And here you're going to see some of the tools that I'm going to be using today. And so I have these wood blocks, and these wood blocks are from Michaels. Obviously, there's 16 that comes in a pack. I'm going to say they're about 4 or 5 inches in width. You'll see me wearing my gloves today, and I'm wearing them already, even though I'm nowhere near dye yet, because I am forgetful. And if I don't put my gloves on now, I will have blue hands by the end of this class. So I have them on, and they're going to stay on, and I'm going to have nice, clean hands when I'm finished. We'll see how that goes. I also have some twine or some jute, and that's going to be for some of the twisting techniques. I've got some scissors. I've got some binder clips. You don't have to have the exact same binder clips that I suggested in the list, but some kind of binder clips would be nice. And if you want to do a variation of smaller binder clips and larger binder clips, you can do that too. And then I do have several rubber bands to do a little bit more of a kind of nod towards tie-dye. And you might have done some tie-dye before in your past. So all of the materials that I'm going to be using are 100% cotton. So I'm going to be using cotton t-shirts and cotton tote bags. And then this is the dye. It's an all-purpose dye. They also have a synthetic dye. So if you're going to use something like a polyester, a more synthetic fabric, you want to make sure that you get a different version of the dye. But this dye is going to be really good for cotton, wool, nylon, and more. So I'm going to be working with cotton. If you're using wool or using silk, then instead of adding salt to your water, you're actually going to want to add vinegar to your water. I'm going to be focusing on cotton today, so that's why I added a little bit of salt to my water. Okay, here comes our first dyeing technique. So we are going to start with the binder clips, and we're going to start with this kind of pattern. You can do this on a t-shirt, you can do this on a bag. Actually, I lied. I'm going to do, I didn't mean to lie, I'm sorry. I'm going to do this rectangular pattern, and I'm going to do that one on the bag. So this is the one that's going to use the wood blocks, and it's going to use some rubber bands. So if you have those materials handy, or if you want to watch, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take my first cotton bag, and I'm going to go ahead and put it into my sink and get it wet. So you're dampening your material. And now that it's a bit damp, I'm putting it onto my counter. And I am going to take the bag. Obviously, here's the top with the little handles for the bag. And I'm going to fold the bag into thirds. I think I'll turn it this way. So I'm going to fold this part up, and then I'm going to fold accordion fold this part going backwards. So I folded the bag into thirds using kind of an accordion style fold, and the bag is damp. And then I'm just going to fold this up one more time. And this is going to create a really nice space for our rectangle for our wood blocks. So we're going to take these two wood pieces, and you do want to have your fabric to hang over the edge of your wood blocks. So if you have smaller wood blocks, you could potentially do another fold if you wanted to, or if you have a larger block, you could potentially do larger folds or not have to do as many folds. So I'm going to set these up, and I'm going to sandwich the material in between these two wooden boards. Now, what this is doing is this is a resist technique. If anyone's ever heard of batik, batik is a resist technique of dyeing that uses wax. So you put different wax designs and stamp wax, and then you dye something, and then you peel off the wax, and obviously underneath the wax is going to be white, and everywhere else is going to be the color that you're dyeing. So this resist technique is going to keep this shape throughout these folds. Now it's not going to be perfect, and that's kind of the natural style of Shibori. So you are going to get some bleeding. It's not going to be a perfect white rectangle when we're done. And I'm using these rubber bands to secure the two wooden blocks into this sandwich. And then because I happen to have these handles, I'm going to go for it and add some extra design to the handles by doing kind of like a classic tie-dye technique of using the rubber bands in order to give me some lines. So where the rubber bands are, the dye is going to have a harder time getting into those spaces. Not impossible, because dye is, you know, good at its job, but it will be a little bit lighter. So even if some color gets through, you'll be able to see a difference between this fabric and this fabric because of these different resist techniques. So I'm going to do a couple of rubber bands on the handle. Maybe two more. And then I'm going to put two more rubber bands going this way too. So I'm curious in the chat if this is your first time hearing about Shibori, or if you've heard about it but just haven't tried it before. I'm curious to know if you know much about these techniques. I think in the States we love a good tie-dye, but Shibori is a really fun practice that we can bring back, or we can make relevant everywhere. Okay, so now that I have the handle, first time to learn about it. Okay, great. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to put this going across this way. And I'm going to put this one going across this way. And that's going to keep those boards nice and secure. Oh, you tried it once, cool. And this is ready to go into the dye bath. So my dye bath is, the water has been heating up. So I'm going to put the dye bath over into my sink in just a little bit. This one is finished. I'm going to put it off to the side, but we are going to talk about a couple more techniques. Rich, if you don't mind switching back to my other camera for the next technique, I'm going to be using a white t-shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and take the white t-shirt and I'm going to put it under my sink and get it damp again. This is a 100% cotton t-shirt. And for this technique, we're going to do the one that's more like a spiral. And for our spiral, we're going to be using some twine in order to add some extra texture and add some extra resist. So let me show you in the red one. This is one I did on like a napkin. You can probably tell much better on this one, some of those lines in the design that were made using that twine. So when you're going to wrap this up, we're going to take it and make it kind of like a little ghost. And then we're going to go bit by bit and kind of wrap twine around it to give it some different texture. And then when we open it up, it will kind of, usually it does tend to have a side that's a little darker than the other side because some of these get hidden underneath the folds. And that's normal and that's natural. It's not going to be a perfect spiral and that's okay. And then on this blue one I did, so notice again, there's darker portions and there's lighter portions, but it does kind of add to the unique style. You can decide where you want your spiral to begin. I usually try and begin it towards the center of the shirt, but if you wanted to start it at the bottom corner, you could do that as well. So now that I have my t-shirt damp, I'm using kind of a kid-sized t-shirt so that we can see it a little better. I'm going to come to the center of the shirt. I'm going to put my finger up here like a little ghost. This is where my spiral is going to begin. I'm going to pinch this and try to let as much of this fall as naturally as you can, to keep it as even as you can, to try to get as many different sides to have that dark color as we can. Now I'm going to take a little bit of twine and I'm going to tie off. I'll show you this when I hold it up in just a moment. I'm tying a little knot about 1 inch away from the top, and it's fine to tie a knot. It's fine. You don't have to tie it in a bow or something that's easy to take out, because eventually I might just cut this in order to get it off anyway. So don't worry too much about that. But I have the twine that started on the top of this. And then I'm going to take this spool of twine and I'm going to be wrapping it around. So you want to try and wrap it tight. So maybe go down a little bit and then come back up and then maybe go down to the next portion. And when you come back up, you can make it even tighter. And I'm going to keep going down. And I'll crisscross over to make some more different textures. And I'm kind of tightening it on my second wrap. So it looks like a big bundle of sage. Also may or may not resemble some witchcraft. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm doing very fun crafts. Definitely not doing spells, but now I'm going to tie a knot in order to secure this end. And I'm just kind of tying it through, and you can leave that end, it's fine. So this now is ready to put into the dye bath as well. So we are good to go with 2 of our different techniques. We have our binding technique that uses the wooden blocks. We have our binding technique that uses the twine to make like a spiral. And then the last one I'm going to do is I'm going to do one where we're going to use our binder clips. So one of the questions in the chat asked, if you don't dampen the fabric, will you get more white? And the answer is not necessarily. So if you don't dampen the fabric, a lot of the different dye is going to take a little bit more to get into the fabric. So if the fabric's already wet, then the dye has an easy way to get back into the fabric itself and kind of embed itself in. But if it's totally dry, bone dry, then it's going to take a little bit more, and you're probably going to want to leave it in the dye bath a little bit longer in order for that dye to have time to soak in. So the water's kind of helping it. It's welcoming it into the fabric and saying, hey, it's already good in here. Come on in, enjoy me. So I thought Shibori was only done with wax. Good question. So the tie method is a lot like tie-dye. You are absolutely correct. The thing that you're thinking of, I think, with wax is what's called batik. So a batik print is done using just wax resist. And usually what they do with batik is you take something and you make a stamp and you dip the stamp into wax. And then I would continue to make that pattern all over the fabric. And so I have this wax resist that then I put into the dye bath. And when I pull it out, I just need to get rid of the wax again by heating it up again, or by scraping and removing it. And then that creates a different kind of resist. So you can think about watercolor. There's lots of different resist formulas, different liquid formulas that can do a resist. When you're doing a watercolor, you could also use washi tape or masking tape in order to leave some white spaces. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So yes, dampen your fabric. It is going to help the dye get in there. And we're going to do one more Shibori technique. So I'm going to use another t-shirt. I'm going to go ahead and get it dampened in my sink. And this time we're going to use binder clips. So Rich, if you don't mind switching over again. Thank you. I have my t-shirt. And I'm going to fold up my t-shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half, and I'm going to match the arms to the arms. And I'm going to fold it in half again. And you can decide if you want to fold it one more time. I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to fold these arms up like this. So now I have a really long rectangle. And this time I'm going to use binder clips. So every time I put these binder clips, the pressure of the binder clips is resisting, keeping a fabric. And so it ends up kind of looking almost like a little butterfly, which I think is pretty cool. So by putting all the different binder clips on, we're going to just add those little pops of color here and there using this technique. So I'm going to take my binder clips, and it doesn't really matter if the clips close or if they stay open, because the part that's really doing the resisting is the part right here along the line that's tightest to the fabric. So I like having them lined up, and I like having them on a long line. But if you want to do binder clips sporadically throughout the whole entire thing, you can do that too. But this gives it more of a purposeful pattern, I think. Okay. There's also another, a couple more, well, there's lots more Shibori techniques that I'm not showing you today, but one that I always think is interesting is like taking found objects, and then let's say that you find like a rock or something, and you put a rock here, and then you can tie a rubber band around it. So you can have lots of different found objects to just kind of give you those little bursts of like little color rings. And that's kind of a fun way, especially with kids. It's fun to find random things to throw into your Shibori to see what happens. Make it a big science experiment. So I have this row. I'm going to do these up here. And I'm obviously not measuring, but I am trying to match them up as best I can. And you'll see on the ones that I'm going to open for you today that I use the mini binder clips on the one that I'm going to show you today. We can see the difference in those, what's going to happen with this. I'm going to fold this arm over, and I'm going to put clips here, here, and here to match with these. Okay. I want to do one last set of clips right at this fold too, just to get a little bit more pattern on the sleeve. So you can arrange your binder clips however you'd like. But I did do a little bit of folding. I think I folded in half and in half again. So we have fourths going on this design, giving us a nice rectangular strip. What's also nice about this rectangular strip is that it's very movable. With the shibori that I did with the twine, this is a really long piece. So hopefully it still has enough movement to kind of round out and fit into my pot when I'm doing it. If it's not going to fit into your pot, another recommendation I have is those roasting pans. So those roasting pans can sometimes be longer and more rectangular. And so if you have a longer shape that's not going to quite fit into a pot, you can try using a roasting pan, and then you have a wider area and you don't have to have that much water or that much dye in that pan in order to cover it. So those are a couple ideas. And speaking of pans and water and dye, I think it's time. So I'm going to move my camera over towards my sinks. There we go. And now I'm going to bring the water that was boiling from my stove, and it's now warm. It's definitely not boiling anymore. And I'm going to put it into this sink. Now feel free to do this outside. Feel free to do this somewhere that you feel comfortable with. I've done it a lot of times in here, and I know that I can do it without destroying my sink. So that's what I'm going to do. If at any point any dye gets anywhere, I like to take my water and just immediately rinse it and let it go down the sink, let it go down the drain. Now on the Rit Dye website, it does talk about disposal of the dye, and it does say that it's safe for drains, it's safe for sinks, it's safe to go down sinks. So according to their website, all of this is on the up and up. If you want to dispose it down the sink, you can. Now, once I have a dye bath going, it's a party. And so I like to dye a lot of different things because I don't want to waste a good dye bath. So sometimes I'll take wooden shapes, like maybe even this wooden piece, and dye it, and then I'll use it for another art project. Or at my house, we sell a lot of those plywood pieces that are so fun, of all different shapes and sizes. And right now we have wooden eggs. So if you want to dye some eggs, literally dye some eggs, you can do that too using the dye bath we have. So I have this pot of water, and I have my Rit dye. I'm going to shake it up. And I'm going to pour probably about 1/3 of this bottle for this size pot. Now there's more proper instructions on Rit Dye's website talking about, I think it's a cup to 3 gallons is one of the suggested measurements. But of course you can always add more dye for darker colors and use less dye or more diluted dye in order to have a lighter color. So I'm going to use about 1/3 of the bottle. And I'm going to pour that in. And I'm going to use a spoon that I do not use for cooking. So this is definitely a crafting spoon. And I'm going to stir that in. And if any of this indigo starts to splash in my sink, like I said, I just quickly wash it down, because you just want to keep it from getting a chance to sit anywhere so that it's not going to dye anything that you don't want to have dyed. So it is time to start putting some items into the dye bath. So here's my first shibori that we did with the wooden block resist. And this is going to fit nicely into this pot. I can use my spoon again to kind of submerge it. And it will submerge after a little bit. And I'm going to take a look at a clock. I suggest you leaving it in the dye bath for about 3 to 5 minutes. And you can, after that, put it into a color fixative. I'm not going to use the color fixative technique in the shirts and bags I've shown you so far. I've only used the salt. I haven't used any extra color fixatives. The fixative is going to help you keep the blue in the blue area and the white, helps you stop the colors from bleeding. It's also going to help the colors stay in the fabrics a lot better. So this is going to be in here for about 3 to 5 minutes, but I can go ahead and add some of my other Shibori into the same pot at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that in there. And I see some drops. So you'll see me continually rinse my sink so that none of those drops have a chance to stay and dye my sink. So I have those two, and then I have my binder clips, my last Shibori piece I can put into the pot as well. And I think I'm going to be able to fit all three at the same time, which is nice. I saw that splash. All right, I'm going to let this sit for a couple of minutes, and then what I do next is I'm going to put it into gallon bags. So I have gallon freezer bags that I take, and I'm going to take these out. I am going to rinse them in cool water, and then I'm going to put them into these gallon bags. Now, the way that I like to do this, because I'm not using the color fixative, I like to put these dye bags outside if it's a sunny day and let them soak in this bag in the sun for 24 hours. And then tomorrow I'll open up the bags and the dye will have a lot more chance to set. Now, if you're using the color fixative, you can move this process along much faster. So if you have a color fixative, it'll tell you, I think it's 4 teaspoons for 3 gallons, if I remember correctly. And you'll have a nice bath of that cold water. And then once they come from this pot, they go into that fixative for about 20 minutes, let it soak and rinse out, and then you're done. And you can open up the Shibori and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. So for the technique that I'm using today without the color fixative, I'm going to put them into the gallon bags. I'm going to let them kind of marinate in the color in the gallon bags outside or somewhere inside if it's not a very sunny day for me today. And so the sun's not really going to do anything extra for me today. It might just rain outside. So I can leave them in those gallon bags overnight. And then I'm going to open up those gallon bags tomorrow, and I'm going to rinse them with cold water and open them. So I did that technique knowing this was going to happen, where I have these dye bags that have been in here overnight. So these have all been in here for 24 hours. I'm going to take them out. I'm going to rinse them with cold water again to kind of release any extra dyes. And then I am going to open them up and reveal them, which is going to be my favorite part of this class. So I think I have been talking 23, 27, almost 3 to 5 minutes. So these are just about ready for me to take out and put into the gallon bags. So I'll show you that process. So the first one I put in, I believe, was the wooden board. And it doesn't really matter, but I'm just trying to do it in the order I put them in. And so I can take this, and I'm going to use my other sink too. And I'm going to put cold water. I'm also going to make my spots disappear so that I don't dye anything blue or indigo. And I'm going to run this color. Now, this color is pretty light, and I know why it's pretty light, because I made a mistake. And I accidentally used my polyester bag instead of my cotton bag. So you can see already that that color on the polyester is definitely not going to be the same as it will be on the rest. That will all be cotton. So let me make sure that I have all my spots in my sink taken care of. And I'm going to keep going, and you'll see that all the cotton fabric is going to be dyed much darker. Okay, next one. I'm going to get out the twine. I'm going to rinse it with cold water and try and let some of the excess dye release into the sink. If you don't want to use this in your sink, you can also use big tubs. Plastic tubs work just fine. Now that I've done some rinsing, I'm going to put it into my gallon bag. I'm going to let it sit overnight. I'm going to pull it out tomorrow. So you can tell, take a look at this, the polyester versus the cotton, that's a huge difference, huge difference. Okay. Keep taking care of my sink. We are doing well. I have my gloves on. I'm proud of myself. I am not making a disaster. That's important to me. Okay, I'm gonna wring out a little bit of the excess dye and grab any spots. Some excess dye out. And I'm ready for my next gallon bag. Technically at this point, your dye bath is finished, and you can, if you want to, rinse it down the sink, obviously with lots of extra water, just to make sure, and do it a little bit at a time in case you have a plumbing issue or something you don't want to have a backup and then have all this dye in your sink, because you will dye your sink. So be careful with that. So I also at this point would throw other shirts I want to tie dye. Maybe if you have a shirt that has a big stain on it or something, put it in blue, see what happens. Add some other rubber bands, see what happens. Experiment with some different fabrics. So I could also throw in, I'm looking around my room to see if I have anything to throw in, but feel free to throw in some wooden pieces and things like that to get the dye too. It's fun to see how the dye works with lots of different surfaces and lots of different colors. So I'm going to put this wood piece in here and let that dye. If you haven't already seen it, I have a Rit dye class where I teach how to make a plant stand. And so we use a wooden plant stand and we dip it into the dye, and then we do Posca markers over top of it. And they are gorgeous. So go to the Michaels YouTube channel and you can search Rit dye and you should be able to find the plant stands. So a question in the chat says, do you need to heat set the dye? And the answer to that is that's kind of what I do when I put them in the bags and put them outside. That's kind of my version of the heat set. So if you're doing a color fixative, you do not need to heat set it because you do just go ahead and dip it into that for about 20 minutes. And then when you take it out and rinse it off one more time, you're pretty much good to go. You probably should go ahead and put it into a dryer. That's usually what I end up doing after there's no more color in it and I'm not going to do anything terrible to my dryer. A lot of times with my normal tie-dye also, I put them into the dryer just to kind of do one last heat set and get that all in there and get that all taken care of. And of course, with any of these dye techniques, you definitely want to be careful and not mix it with your favorite white t-shirt or something like that, because you just don't know until you try it how it's going to do with the rest of your laundry. So wash it separately, be careful with it. You never know. Okay, so these are the bags that I'm going to be opening up tomorrow, but I do have bags to open up today. So I tried last night to use the same techniques that I knew that we were going to be using today to be able to show you kind of like the end results. And when I did my bag yesterday, I did use a cotton bag, so already you can see how much darker this is. And I'm going to use like a garbage bag to kind of put over my space so that if I drip or anything, I'm not going to make a giant mess.
So Megan, Nancy has a question. She's wondering, do you need heat to set the dye?
So yeah, I do think you definitely need heat at some point in the process. So we have the heat at the beginning with the hot water. I'm gonna have the heat when I put my bags out into the sun. But if you also want to add that extra heat source by putting it into the dryer, I think all of those are a great idea. So here we go. This is our first one. Remember, our bag had these rubber bands and it also had the wood blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting open some of these rubber bands. This is so exciting. You never know how it's going to go. Ooh. I am going to ooh and ah at my own work, so you can expect that. I like how this is going already. This is making me happy. All right. I'm just cutting these with scissors. You can take the time to take them off, and then of course you can reuse the rubber bands. So that would be the environmental thing to do. Okay. Let me take these off. All right, are you ready? It's exciting. Okay, I see it already. Here comes the unfold. Nice. Awesome. Yay. So here's our bag handle, and notice how it has a couple of those cute stripes. And then here's what happens with that block resist. So it doesn't completely block out all the color, but this, remember, has also been sitting overnight. So it's had a lot of time for some of the dye to seep into that white spot. But I love the way that that turned out. I think that looks great too. I'm just needing to be careful of my floor. You, of course, will not have to hold up your things to the camera, so you can be more careful in your kitchen or outside, wherever you're working. But I don't want to dye my floor while we're doing this. It doesn't feel worth it. So I'm going to put this to the side. And you might want to rinse it one more time in your sink. Yes. So I'll show both sides. Here's holding it this way. Obviously the handles are right here. Holding it this way and this way. So you can tell that both sides have a really nice look to them. It's not going to be just a one-sided dye. Awesome. Heat setting them with an iron? Sure. That sounds like a good idea too. I just rinsed that one more time with cold water just in case, so that I can give myself some time to clean that up while I'm opening up the other ones. All right, here comes our next shirt. This one was the Twine. How this one did. I'm going to rinse it first in case there's any extra dye so it doesn't drip on my floor. Okay. And then I am going to cut the twine. Okay, unravel that. Cool so far. So when I'm taking that twine off, you can see that lighter color underneath. Yay, that's what we wanted. And then the way that it spirals was from us kind of wrapping it in the way that we wrapped it. So I'm going to get the twine off the top of this as well. Cutting this off. Careful not to cut my shirt. There we go. Okay, here we go. Yes, look at how cool that is. Oh my God, I love it. The colors are great. So here's the front and here's the back. And we managed to get quite a bit of really bright white, a little bit of that in-between blue, and some of that really dark indigo. Yes, this is fantastic. I love this one. So the twine just adds some extra feel. So you can see right here, you can see some of those different twine spots where it was wrapped up. But it's the process of how we held it when we were wrapping it that causes that spiral. Yay, beautiful. Okay, and our last grand reveal was our binder clips. Okay, so I think I told you before that I used smaller binder clips on this one. So it was a smaller kids t-shirt, so I decided to use smaller binder clips than the larger ones that we were using. So now I'm going to take all of these off. Just start unclipping. This is so fun. I'm having a good time. So you can already kind of see some of the resist color as I'm taking these clips off. So watch me take this clip off and reveal that little bit of color underneath. And just those pops of color and the way that the binder clip attaches kind of makes what almost feels like a butterfly to me. And I like that it has kind of a mirrored look because we put all the clips onto the folds. So I'm just taking off all of these mini binder clips that I decided to put on here. But I think I'm gonna end up liking this look quite a bit. And I did the sleeves similar to the way that I showed you, where I have one layer of the sleeves here with binder clips, and then I folded the sleeve out, and then I have another binder clip just to give it another row. Okay, here it comes. You ready for this? You just really don't know what's gonna happen until it happens. So I'm gonna rinse it. And let's have our grand reveal. Are you ready for this? Drum roll. Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. I know, right? So fun. And how well did all of those turn out? We were so lucky. So all three of these are the techniques that we did together today. So when I have those bags that you already saw me fill up with water, or not with water, with all of our Shibori, I'm gonna take those, I'm gonna let them sit outside if it's sunny, or I'm just gonna let them sit somewhere for about 24 hours. Then I'll rinse them in the cold water like you saw me do, and I'll release them. And then I will probably take some of these pieces and go ahead, since they're soaking wet right now, and put them into the dryer just so that it doesn't have all the blue dye or indigo dye dyeing somewhere. Or I could hang them out outside if I had a nice day. But we had our spiral, we had our rectangular block release, and we had our binder clips. And all three of those Shibori techniques really worked out really well for us. So don't wash them with other things right away, but you can eventually wash them, of course, because they are to be worn. Just wash them separately and just be careful of any colors that might dye or things like that. If you use the fixative, you're gonna have a lot better chance of keeping it from dyeing onto your other colors. But I like to use a more natural kind of sunshine and happiness. You know how it goes. So I think that's just about it for today. If you end up doing one of these Shibori techniques and want to show it off, please tag us at Learn with Michaels. You can also follow me personally at the number 4M Coleman, and you can see I'll post some pictures of my finished bags and shirts and things like that too, so that you can see how those turned out. I'll even go ahead and open up that polyester one just so you can kind of see the difference between polyester using this particular dye, which didn't really work as well. But yes, feel free to join me at 4M Coleman so you can see and keep track of some of the different classes I'm teaching for Michaels and some of the different projects that I'm working on. And it was so good to see you. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.